Threatening to strain diplomatic relations between the U.S. and its allies around the world, tens of thousands of sensitive U.S. State Department documents have been leaked. Today, the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks provided the documents to several news organizations, some of which have published them. The WikiLeaks action is one of the Obama administration has called dangerous. According to the London newspaper The Guardian, it reveals these cables, including grave fears in Washington and London over the security of Pakistan's nuclear weapons program, alleged links between the Russian government and organized crime, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's activities under the Obama administration, as well as thousands of files from the George Bush presidency. Let's go right to our foreign affairs correspondent, Jill Doherty in Washington. So how potentially damaging is this, Jill?
Well, you know, there's a very wide range of documents that are being leaked now. Some of them are not that important. You might say, like, comments about world leaders could be embarrassing, could not be uncomfortable, but they might not be that bad. But when you get into things like anything that deals with terrorism, negotiating positions by the United States, and perhaps implications that leaders are not on the side of the United States, that's where you get into areas that could be very dangerous. And we're talking about 251,000 cables, both coming from Washington out to the field, all the embassies and consulates and missions around the world, and then back, almost like a filtering machine, you know, the diplomats and other people working at those embassies around the world, collecting information and then sending it back to Washington. There could be quite a lot of things that are dangerous. And Fred, it's important to point out that these apparently are over the last 3 years. That pretty much means the Obama administration. It's not something that they could say, well, it happened in a previous administration. So if you look at some of these, certainly anything dealing with Iran could be sensitive. Things about the START negotiations, that arms control agreement with Russia, things like that certainly could be highly damaging. We should also read the statement that the White House released today. You're hearing certain comments similar coming from the Pentagon, from the State Department, but here's what the White House said. President Obama supports responsible, accountable, and open government at home and around the world, but this reckless and dangerous action runs counter to that goal. By releasing stolen and classified documents, WikiLeaks has put at risk not only the cause of human rights, but also the lives and work of those individuals. We condemn in the strongest terms the unauthorized disclosure of classified documents and sensitive national security information. So, Fred, they have known, of course, about this. They've been notifying governments around the world, but now it's out there. People will be sifting through all of this, and we're going to hear the detailed information.
And in fact, Jill, how much has the State Department told you about Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and other American diplomats who have done just that you just mentioned, reaching out to a lot of these countries preemptive to the release of these documents to try to smooth any feathers before they're hearing it from the general public?
Well, what they're pointing out is, number one, in talking to these governments, every government around the world does similar things. I mean, they correspond, they tell their embassies what the policy is, they try to get information back from their embassies. Everyone knows how this works. But what they're trying to avoid is to say, look, maybe, in a sense, get over it. That these are things that governments say to each other and about each other, and everyone knows that. But the things that begin to get into policy, tipping the hand of the United States about where it's going with some sensitive negotiations, those are things that you can't really finesse. You just have to have it out there and try to deal with the repercussions. And it may not be easy.
Yeah, at this point, is the State Department revealing to you, any of your sources revealing how they are going about trying to track these documents or cables that were released? Who would be responsible? Was it a former employee, a disgruntled employee? How do they learn or go about finding the source of the leak?
Well, it is assumed that it's the same source that U.S. military person who leaked the previous documents from the Department of Defense. They are not saying specifically that's how it happened, but it would appear that that indeed is how it happened. And you know, Frederica, one of the things that's kind of ironic about this is it was easier for almost anybody in the food chain, certainly in the military, to get access to those cables, because after 9/11 they realized that departments of the government weren't talking to each other, and so they tried to open that up, make it the information more accessible to a greater number of people. Now, since then, the Department of Defense has taken steps to try to control that and patch the possibility for leaks. But that is how it happened, with sometimes the best of intentions to keep the government talking to various parts of the government.
All right, Jill Doherty, thanks so much from Washington. Appreciate it, State Department correspondent. So right now I'm going to bring in former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, Mark Kimmett. So, Mark, in your view, how potentially damaging is this, considering, according to New York Times reporting, some of these items were classified as secret, none marked as top secret, but some are labeled. Some 9,000 of these 250,000 documents are labeled no form, meaning shorthand for material considered too delicate to be shared with any foreign government. That, according to the New York Times reporting.
Well, let's assume of the 250,000, only 90% of them were routine cables that didn't reveal anything spectacular. But that still leaves 25,000 documents, and even if only 1% of them were were secret and indicated significant negotiations, that's still a very, very large number of documents out there that are not only embarrassing, but also potentially put our soldiers at risk, put our diplomats at risk for their candidness and their reporting, as well as Jill Doherty said, revealing sensitive negotiation positions.
When you analyze the dumping of these documents, and they date as far back as the Bush administration, and they certainly involve this current Obama administration, does this remove from you any kind of political objective here?
No, I don't think that there's a political objective. I believe there's a political agenda, however. There seems to be a view on the part of WikiLeaks that in this desire for open transparency, that anything is open for revealing to the public. But it is clear that the release of these documents is damaging not only to our soldiers on the ground, but our diplomats that are serving in countries around the world.
Do you believe that it's the same person responsible responsible for the first dumping of documents that involved intelligence as it pertains to the Afghanistan war just earlier this year? You think this would be the same person responsible here?
Well, I don't want to speculate the source of these information, but I would suspect that the person who had access to sensitive intelligence reports used the same and had the same access to sensitive diplomatic reports as well. So it only follows that people would suggest that this came from the allegations against Specialist Bradley Manning.
So let me know what is likely taking place right now as it pertains to State Department or even DOD personnel as this government tries to figure out the source of the leak. Who would be in on trying to obtain these materials and then supply them to this website, WikiLeaks?
Well, again, the people that wanted to reveal this, we can't for a moment understand the motivations behind why people would want to do this. I think it's up to the courts to decide in the case of the allegations against Specialist Manning, whether, number one, whether he did it or not, and number two, what the motivations were behind that. But that is not nearly as important as the outcome, which is the damage that is done on the intelligence side for the military documents and on the diplomatic side for these cables that are being released at present.
I wonder if it's equally important because there could be another dumping of a set of documents, and if this government investigators would be looking at who would be responsible for this to try to prevent another document dumping like this.
Well, there certainly could be more document dumping like this in the future for people that have any number of motivations. But I think it's as important for WikiLeaks and its ilk to recognize that the damage that they're doing by releasing this information and be held responsible for the damage that occurs from releasing this information.
All right, former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, Mark Kimmett, thanks so much, and I will be talking with you again throughout the afternoon. Appreciate your time. And, of course, we're going to continue to follow this recent website, WikiLeaks, revealing of these State Department documents to the world now.